said something to you, Mary.
Yes. Cool.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Welcome to Hokyoji's Sunday Dharma Talk. Today we have the Reverend Erin Davis speaking. Reverend Davis began practicing at the Missouri Zen Center in 2008 and attended her first Great Sky Sesshin at Hokyoji in 2009. She received jukai from Rosan Yoshida, who looks like he's here with us today, in 2010, and ordination from him in 2019. She practiced briefly at Shogoji in Kyushu, Japan in 2011, and she described her experience for the Missouri Zen Center newsletter. She currently resides in the arid shrub steppe of eastern Washington. Thank you, Erin, for giving the talk today. And you're muted. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? I know sometimes. Okay. Oh, thank you. Great. Well, thank you, Ekkyo, and thank you for the chance to talk to you today. This is my very first Dharma talk, so there are some nerves, and I will probably be reading from this paper most of the time, so I hope you'll be generous. So today I thought I'd talk about the Metasuta, or at least a small part of it. We've been reciting this text for the past year or so at Hokyoji as part of our online morning service. And the version we've been using is in this book. It's called Boundless Heart by Christina Feldman. Boundless Heart, the Buddhist Path of Kindness, Compassion, Joy, and Equanimity. And those four things, those are called the Brahma Viharas, or the four divine abodes. They're also translated as the four immeasurable states. And the author discusses them one by one, and she says that the first one, metta, or kindness, is the foundation for the other three, and the foundation for an ethical life. So having researched a little in a very non-scholarly way, I understand that the Metasuta is a discourse by the Buddha that was collected into the Sutta Nipata, which is thought to contain some of the earliest Buddhist material. It's one of the most commonly recited texts in the Theravada tradition. And while historically it hasn't figured prominently in Japanese Zen, it seems that more Soto groups, maybe especially in the United States and the West, have begun to incorporate it in their services. So in a moment, I'd like to read the translation of the text that Feldman uses in her book. But before I do, I'd like to look at the background story that, according to tradition, prompted the Buddha to deliver this discourse to his monks. So these so-called commentarial stories were kind of new to me. You can see what kind of a beginner I am. In this case, the commentary is traditionally ascribed to the 5th century Indian commentator Buddhaghosa. It's included in this big edition of the Sutta Nipata, which is translated and edited by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And it also there's a really nice Wikipedia page on the Metasuta. And linked to that page are a couple of, or a talk by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and he also gives this story there. So I really recommend you read it. It's a really nice story and funny. He's such a good speaker. So at the beginning, he says, whether you believe the story or not, there are elements of these commentarial stories you have to wonder whether they're true or not. Or if they're just the invention of preachers to entertain the audience, I don't know, but the stories are entertaining, so I tell them. So we did. So I'm gonna read. It's a great story, so I'm gonna read quite a bit of it. So according to the story, The rainy season was approaching, and during the rainy season, monks would go and find a place to stay when they can't go wandering and traveling around. And often when the Buddha was alive, they would come to the Buddha to get instructions in a meditation subject. So a group of monks came to the Buddha to receive instructions, and then they set out to find a quiet and secluded place to practice meditation very earnestly. And they found a place in the northern part of India, in the foothills of the Himalayas. They spent the night there, and on the next day they went on alms rounds. And the people in the villages around there were very delighted to have them. They offered them alms very generously. And over the course of a few days, the people showed them that they were devout and earnest about learning about the Dhamma. And they said, why don't you spend the rainy season here? We'll be very happy to build huts for you and provide you with your basic requisites. So the monks were delighted. It was a beautiful, quiet place with shady areas and cool breezes. And for the first few days, they sat in meditation through the night. The next day, they came out, all smiles, very happy. Things were going well. After a couple of days, suddenly all of them at night started seeing strange, frightening forms. Horrible faces would appear out of thin air. This is Halloween, so that's kind of why I picked this story. They would hear frightening, shrill sounds, screams, shuddering, roaring, growling sounds, not like animals, but supernatural sounds. None of the monks would discuss this with the other monks, but they started to look very grim, and they would hardly eat any of the food they collected on their alms rounds. After a few days, the elder monk in the group gathered all the monks together, and he asked what was happening. The monks told him, and then they said, we have to go back and tell the Buddha about this and find some other place to stay. So what was happening right now, this is still Bhikkhu Bodhi speaking, this is the explanation, the commentary. There are certain things called earth devas, and in this case, these deities were living in the forest where the monks were staying. They liked the quiet and solitude of the forest, but when the monks came to stay in the forest, for 2 or 3 days they were very happy because they had some regard for the monks. But when it became clear the monks were going to continue staying on, and then he says, I'll give you an analogy. And he gives an example, it's really kind of funny. He gives the example of a friend who comes to stay. And for the first day or so, the person's very happy to have his friend there, and he sleeps on the couch and gives the friend his room and all that. But pretty soon his friend starts looking like he's gonna stay there. He gives out his address as a place where he can be reached and his phone number, and he starts having deliveries come and deliver them to his house. And so he said this is the state that the forest deities were in. They didn't want the monks to settle in their forest, so they had conspired with each other to frighten the monks away, and it seemed like they were going to succeed. The monks left the forest and went to the Buddha and told him about their problem. The Buddha thought to himself, where can these monks succeed in their meditation practice? Where can they attain arhatantship? Using his divine eye or spiritual vision, he looked to the south and the west and the east, but he couldn't find a place where they could succeed. Then he looked to the north, and his spiritual vision focused on only one place where they could succeed in their meditation, and that was the forest they had just left. So the Buddha taught them how to live harmoniously with the deities, and the method by which to win their affection, and that is, he taught them how to develop loving kindness toward the deities through the practice of metta bhavana, meditation on loving kindness. And to help them develop the loving kindness, he also taught them the sutta, the Metasuta. And he taught them they should learn it by heart, get it very firm in their memories, and they should recite it every day, morning and evening. And so this is the commentary. The monks returned to the forest, and they were all together approaching and reciting the Metasuta, and also while reciting it, radiating loving kindness toward the deities. The radiations of their loving kindness spread out to the deities and affected them so much that they came out to greet the monks. Some deities took their bowls, some their shoulder bags, welcomed them back to the forest, washed their feet, prepared their lodgings for them, and then the monks lived there very happily in the forest, and they never had any trouble from the deities again. So, Drink of water here. So I thought with that story in mind, maybe I'd just so it's fresh in our mind, I'd read the Metasuta, the version we've been reciting in the mornings, just so we can have it. So it says the Metasuta. To reach the state of peace, one skilled in the good should be capable and upright, easy to speak to and straightforward, of gentle nature and not proud, contented and easily supported, living lightly and having few duties, wise and with senses calmed, not arrogant and without greed for supporters, and should not do the least thing that the wise would reproach them for. One should reflect in this way. May all beings be happy and secure. May all beings be happy-minded. Whatever living beings there may be, whether weak or strong, tall, large, medium or short, small or big, seen or unseen, near or distant, born or to be born, may they without exception all be happy-minded. Let no one despise another or deceive anyone anywhere. Let no one through anger or hatred wish for another's suffering. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her child, her only child, so for all beings one should guard one's boundless heart. With boundless friendliness for the whole world should one cultivate a boundless heart. In all directions, without obstruction, without hate, and without ill will, standing or walking, sitting or lying down, whenever one is awake, may one stay with this recollection. This is called the best and most sublime way of dwelling in this world. One who is virtuous, endowed with insight, not clinging to wrong view, and having overcome all passion for sensual pleasure, will not come to lie in a womb again. Okay. So I was curious to see how some contemporary Zen teachers in the U.S. might interpret this story, and I found a number of references by Googling a little bit. Not surprisingly, some people talked about the way our minds create stories when we interact with the world. And for example, here's an excerpt from a talk called The Roots of Compassion Meditation. It's by Joseph Hall. He's a resident priest at Shogoji Zen Center in California. And in the course of his talk, he's making a comparison between the story and a contemporary movie. So he says, this is kind of in the middle, the Buddha didn't trouble the monks with the technical details of the existence of tree spirits. Instead, he went directly to the root of the problem. When we do harm to others, we become attached to the consequences of our actions. When we rationally determine that we have escaped consequences, our deeper minds often correctly come to believe that justice lies hidden somewhere in the world around us. Since the internal monologue has dismissed our cautions and proceeds headlong into self-centered action, the mind simply communicates beyond words and simply weaves the truth into the fabric of an acceptable story. If our actions are harmful, a feeling of nemesis begins to take form. So he thinks that's what's going on in this tree story. And I came across another interesting approach on a blog posting from the Santa Cruz Zen Center. It's called Mettā Sutta, How Does This Ancient Teaching Apply to Contemporary Social Issues? So after summarizing the story, the author refers to a different version of it. And I'll quote from here. In other versions, the abbreviated story, this is a different version then, the disciples had made an encampment near a village in a place that the villagers did not want the disciples to live. The villagers appealed to the disciples to move, and the disciples declined to move. The villagers then went to the Buddha to seek his advice. The Buddha called his disciples to him and offered this teaching that we now know as the Mettā Sutta, the teaching on loving kindness. And then it goes on. Engaging with the practices presented here provides an antidote to our habitual responses within social and political constructs. The Buddha is teaching his disciples to be polite, not arrogant, and not to assert status. In contemporary language, we might say that the Buddha is offering instruction for examining and mitigating privilege. Okay, and then another approach. So this one was maybe perhaps a little more literal. It centered on our developing ecological consciousness, or even a kind of new animism. There is, for example, it's really wonderful annotated bibliography called Buddhism and Ecology bibliography. It was created by Chris Ives and Duncan Buchan Williams for the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. Because I live in the western part of the US in Washington State, which has been experiencing chronic drought and larger and more frequent forest fires, I've been feeling this interpretation with particular intensity. Of course, all of these arenas, our interior psychological states, our interpersonal relationships, our connection with the natural world, are deeply interrelated in ways that are probably impossible to grasp. Dr. Yoshida often refers in his talks to the global problematique, which is called the intertwined problems of resource depletion, species extinctions, and climate change, with all their associated societal conflicts and wars. This is anthropomorphizing, but I'll say I can feel the growing anxiety of the tree spirits, for sure. The world's tree spirits. In fact, I sometimes feel like we understand the science of what is happening right now, at least to some degree. But how do we develop the energy and the will to act just as a mother protects her only child? The Metasuta teaches continuous cultivation of loving kindness and ways to cool the temperature of our activity, living lightly and having few duties. So I'd like to kind of finish up by sharing a personal story and maybe another kind of companion poem. We have poems in this tradition, right? And this has given me some energy to carry on. I'm nowhere near maybe where I need to be. It's ongoing, but and this is just my personal story. Everybody has their own story and their own source of energy. So those who know me will know I like gardening. In fact, some of my best memories from the time I attended the Missouri Zen Center was when we Sangha members would work in the yard and then have a potluck afterwards. I lived in an apartment, so it was a chance to work outside, which I really love. So in any event, when I moved to Kennewick here in Washington, I attended Master Gardener training. And one of the talks in that context was by David James, who's a lepidopterist. And I bought his book, I have it here. It's called The History of Cascadia Butterflies. And he signed it after the talk for me. And it has some really, I just love it. It has some really wonderful pictures of butterflies in all their stages, and gives a kind of and during his talk, he would talk about the native plants that they kind of co-evolved with over millennia. So they have certain plants that they'll use for food and that they'll lay their eggs on, and they're very choosy about it, and so on. And so it was a really great talk. And but the thing that kind of struck me most in this talk was he said, because his job in talking to these agricultural extension offices and the training programs, he says, just plant more flowers. And he said it like that, just plant, because he's yeah, I don't know. I found it really liberating. I think because I think in some senses the science can kind of paralyze us a little. We're looking for a kind of a perfect solution, and I know that we're supposed to be careful about introducing non-native species and invasive species and so on, and it's it's a little worrying, but he was so just kind of fresh and liberating, and he reminded us that life is messy, and you also learn you should study and learn about native plants, of course, but you also learn through trial and error and adapting and co-adapting and that sort of thing. And it was just very humane and very liberating. And it, for me, it brought to mind that image of the 1,000-armed bodhisattva with hands, 1,000 hands and eyes, and it just sort of reminded me that each one of us, each with our own interests and our own skills, can be one of those with just our regular human hands and eyes, can be part of that bodhisattva. Together we can be that bodhisattva. And so I don't know, I just found it encouraging. And I wrote a companion maybe to cooling the temperature of our activity is capable effort, informed by experience, and one hopes wisdom, all with a foundation of loving kindness. So to finish up, I have this poem. I thought it sounded, when I read it, like a description also of how a bodhisattva practices with kindness. It's by Wendell Berry. Maybe some of you know of him. He's an American poet, and he's a farmer and agriculturalist from Kentucky. He advocates for small farms as an antidote to industrial agriculture. And the poem's called "The Man Born to Farming." And of course, women also farm, but that's okay. It's his poem. So he says, "The man born to farming." So here it is. It says, "The grower of trees, the gardener, the man born to farming, whose hands reach into the ground and sprout. To him the soil is a divine drug. He enters into death yearly and comes back rejoicing. He has seen the light lie down in the dung heap and rise again in the corn. His thought passes along the row ends like a mole. What miraculous seed has he swallowed, that the unending sentence of his love flows out of his mouth like a vine clinging in the sunlight and like water descending in the dark." So I thought that was a nice poem. So that's all I have. I don't know. It was really interesting to have the chance to read about the Metasuta a little bit. And so I really appreciated the context of having a talk to do that. So thank you. Yeah. Comments?
Well, I would just like to ask you if you would read that poem one more time.
Sure.
Sometimes it kind of sticks better if you read it twice. At least it helps me.
Yeah, sure. There's one there's one point he calls the soil a divine drug. I thought, well, maybe Buddhists would call that good medicine. I don't know, but I won't interfere. Okay. The grower of trees, the gardener, the man born to farming, whose hands reach into the ground and sprout. To him, the soil is a divine drug. He enters into death yearly and comes back rejoicing. He has seen the light lie down in the dung heap and rise again in the corn. His thought passes along the row ends like a mole. What miraculous seed has he swallowed, that the unending sentence of his love flows out of his mouth like a vine clinging in the sunlight and like water descending in the dark? Yeah.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Yeah, I thought he's really it kind of, Dogen has those four embracing actions, and it reminded me he associated himself with the soil, so it seemed like an identity action there. Just, I don't know. Yeah, it's a really interesting poem.
Thank you, Erin. This is Alan. I'm very happy I could be here for your first Dharma talk.
Yeah, thank you.
I was struck by something in the story, the origin story of the Mettā Sutta, which was that, in effect, the Buddha, he looked around for his disciples to see if there was any better place to do their practice, and he couldn't find a better place than where they were. So I found that to be instructive, that the place to practice is where I am, and to do that. And the Mettā Sutta, I hadn't really thought of the Mettā Sutta as helping me do zazen, but I'm hearing that here too, which is, open to where I'm at and the conditions that are present with loving kindness as part of my zazen practice. So that origin story was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was struck by that too, and I guess because I was thinking in terms of ecological consciousness, I was thinking the same thing. We only have one planet, also, and so we have to do our work here. But yeah, just also whatever our environment. Thank you.
I was, as a retired landscape architect, I'm familiar with some of the ecological issues that you mentioned. But I like the connection between the story. Well, let me try to say it this way. I had encountered in different folklores, like in the Irish, they would say, don't go to that particular ecological area because there are bad spirits there. The little people will come and get your children. In Islam, it's the jinns. Don't build in that area because there are jinns there, these fire spirits. And I began to think that these stories had an ecological basis, that was a poor place to develop, human habitat. But the story that you were saying was about the loving kindness. Reminded me, there's this book you may know, The Hidden Life of Trees, in which, and there's a kind of another book, Finding the Mother Tree, which is a woman's efforts in forestry in your area in Washington, and how through the mitochondria under the ground, it's not one tree, it's a colony of trees, and they all are interdependent. And your story about loving kindness with the spirits of the place kind of reminded me of that. And that, your allusion to gardening is along those lines, right? It's interacting with the ecology in a kind of loving kindness. Yeah, they have. I joined a group. I think it's nationwide, but here in Minnesota, the group is called Monarch Watch, and the monarch butterflies have been kind of degraded and loss of habitat, that kind of thing. And yeah, there are ways to be involved in, not just your own place, but then on the larger network. And thanks for your talk.
Thank you. Yeah, I noticed when I was researching versions of the story, some of them use the word sprites. And I thought that was so interesting because they chose that, maybe it's Old English, I guess, the words sprites for the kind of the same concept, those spirits of the forest. I thought that was a really interesting parallel.
Mhm.
Erin, it was so good to hear you talk about what we've been chanting in so many mornings. You may not know, the rest of you, that Erin, because she lives in Washington and she likes to Zoom sit with us Thursday through Sunday. The Thursday through Saturday, we start at 6:30 Central Time, which means that very faithfully she gets up at 4:30, well, before that, to sit with us. And to me, that's a kind of embodiment of loving kindness. It's just knowing that you're getting up 2 hours earlier than me. I just fills me with a kind and loved kind of energy. So I thank you for that. I was struck again, as I am when we chanted together in the morning, the repetition of being in the state of loving kindness while walking, while sitting, while lying down. That just kind of came through to me, and it reminded me of this morning when I've been cooking for the men's retreat here, to as best I can apply continuous mindfulness. You know how it can be in a kitchen when you've got a lot of food and a lot of people and you need to have it ready by a certain time. It can be easy to lose your mind and to forget that this is for the nourishment of all beings. So I just, I'm so glad Reverend Nelson, Reverend Aikyo asked you to read that berry poem again. So thank you. This has just really stimulated my own heart and I guess intention. It just kind of was like fertilizing me for the day. Thank you very much.
Erin, this is Jim. I'd just like to thank you for your talk. I was very happy I could be here for your first talk. I always enjoy hearing your voice in the morning, like when you lead the meditations. Your voice is always so soothing. And I've got a long day ahead of me outside laboring on the land, and I'm going to remember the little line that you stated in your book about, or the guy talked about just planting flowers and not getting so over involved. Sometimes I try to over plan everything, and I'm into the native plants too, and it's like, oh, maybe I should do this, or I'm doing this wrong. And I think the idea of going out and planting flowers is a message that I'm going to keep in my mind today. Thank you.
Hi, Erin, could you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay. Erin, I'm going to ditto Jim. Your voice is so soothing and loving in itself, and I know you in a couple settings. Studying the Boundless Heart, the book study, and then through the board, Hokyoji board, and so your voice is beautiful to listen to. But one of the things that really struck me And it's something that I use in the Mettā Sutta in the from the Boundless Heart. Is at night when I'm just tossing and turning and worrying and feeling, and you know, everybody has this. I use the metta, loving kindness, just to try to allow myself some compassion. And that has really, that helps me. And self-compassion, I think comes out of the Mettā Sutta, the words. And because we just, I don't know, I feel like we all feel inadequate. So much to do, so much wrong, and beating ourselves up. So I really, really appreciate you bringing that forward today, reading that. And because it really struck me that self-compassion is where you start to move out in the world. Well, thanks.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you.
I'm wondering, hi, I'm wondering if, are you hearing, are the, excuse me, are the rest of you hearing a lot of noise? Or is that just me? I mean, you're hearing a lot of background noise, and I'm thinking maybe if everyone but the speaker mutes, it might help. Now it's quiet. Okay. Anyone else want to speak? Well, it looks like that's it. Erin, I want to thank you again so much for your talk. It was wonderful, and I concur with what Mary said. It was, your voice is lovely to listen to, and it was a great first talk. Just wonderful. Okay, so I have a few announcements. Let's see, we have some upcoming events. Well, next week our Sunday speaker is Ryushin Janfire, who always gives wonderful talks. And November 12th, coming up, we have Caring for the Land. That's a wonderful weekend where you can do some work outside with other folks and care for our space, our land, which is one of the focuses of Erin's talk. So it's a very satisfying kind of work to do. November 19th is our work weekend. You're all welcome to these events. The food is vegetarian and there's no cost for coming. We just appreciate so much everyone's help and assistance in taking care of our campus and our woods. Our Sunday talks are also available on the website. And another way you can support Hokyoji is by connecting with our Facebook and Instagram pages. The Sunday talks and other announcements and information about the community are available there, and often some good pictures of folks at Hokyoji. So please like us on social media and consider sharing our content with your own friends who might be interested. We always appreciate your generosity, which sustains our programs and facilities. We couldn't do this without you. Please consider making a donation today online. Any amount is very much appreciated. And to close, you can find the link for that in the chat, and also you'll find the closing chant there. So I'd love it if you'd join me in the closing chant now. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Erin, and I hope that you all have a happy Halloween. Bye-bye.